With that, I'm excited to welcome and introduce our next session. For the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about how to cultivate an environment of continuous learning and development. A quick reminder, of course, this session will be recorded and available via email following today's session. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce Kiara Graham, Talent Management and Organizational Development Advisor, and Mathieu Dumont, the Director of Product for WorkLeap LMS, to the stage.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Rob.
Rob, for the great welcome in your session. I've been hearing you've been doing good ever since this morning. Good. So, Kira, want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. As you heard from Rob, my name is Kiara, and I am talent management advisor at WorkLeap. I actually started my career not in corporate learning and development, but teaching college communications. But that transitioned into a career in corporate learning and development. I worked as an ed tech consultant, consulting with clients for about 5 years, and I've worked in several industries over the last decade, mainly in learning strategy, and learning and development.
Good. And for those who don't know me, my name is Matt. As Robin said, I'm the director of product for WorkLeap LMS. Been in the L&D space, LMS space for nearly a decade now. So my background is more on the building businesses. So happy to do this today with Kiara, who's the brain into all of the best practices of L&D, and I'll do my best as well to bring this closer to actionables that are at reach for SMBs markets, and make sure that you're leaving with a clear action item by the end of the 45 minutes.
And I think the first thing that we really wanted to talk about today, in terms of setting the stage around continuous learning and the topic that we're addressing, we heard earlier about onboarding as a moment that matters, and I think that's a moment in our employee journey where we tend to think a lot about learning. We're learning, the new role we need to perform. We're learning about the company, our coworkers, what the expectations are for our roles. But what we want to talk about today is that learning is actually not a moment that matters. I know that's the topic for today, moments that matter, but learning is really something that I think underpins all of the moments that matter that we're talking about today. Wouldn't you agree, Mathieu?
Absolutely. It's the underlying story of every single moment that matter. Obviously, like you said, on the onboarding part is it's one of the steepest learning curve that an employee will have to go through, but there are different growth stages within the employee journey, onboarding, growing into a internal subject matter expert, maybe growing into a first time manager. So to me, if you're not growing as a person, you're not growing as a contributor, and the business is not growing as well. So that's why, to me, learning on a continuous basis benefits all parties involved, being the employer, the employee, and the business as a whole. So that's why it should be at the forefront of pretty much every at the forefront, but also like the underlying story of every single strategy that we put in place for our people in the business.
Yeah, I think if you think about the presentation we're going to hear after this, the keynote of today's event, from Jacob Morgan, he's going to be talking about the future of work. And in my opinion, the key to an organization that is ready for the future of work, or being future proof or future ready, or however you want to call it, I think the key isn't being able to predict what's coming in the market, or what skills we're going to need, or what technology we're going to use. I think the key is around enabling an organizational learning culture that values and rewards continuous learning, so that your organization can pivot, can adapt no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, it's all about adaptation. The market changes very fast. The processes evolve on a, depending on your business, daily, weekly, monthly basis. So, being able to switch on a dime and making sure that you're always ahead of the game in terms of having the proper skills to support the business strategies, goals, and individual employee growth plans is paramount.
And I think, both of us over the course of our careers have worked with a lot of organizations that are trying to achieve that goal of being future ready or future proof. And for me, when I work with those kinds of organizations, the question I'm always trying to answer isn't what skills do we need for the future, but how do we enable continuous learning so that no matter what skills we need, we are ready to learn and adapt. And when we think about continuous learning, I think we're often only thinking about the first level that we show on this slide. We're often thinking about employees learning and
Mhm.
developing new skills. But really, continuous learning is made possible at three levels. It happens at the individual level, it happens at the team level, influenced by the managers of those teams, and it happens at the organizational level. And any organization that I've ever worked with, regardless of industry, that has successfully worked towards creating that kind of culture of learning at work, of continuous learning, they have cultivated that environment at all three of these levels. They are the ones that are the most resilient, that are the most prepared to thrive, no matter what the future brings.
Yes, and like a pattern I've been seeing over the past 10 years is a lot of businesses will tackle, let's say, an LMS implementation or trying to build a learning culture to make up for a status quo that's been there for a while. And it feels like a mountain to climb. And at times, I'll be honest, rightfully so. So by shifting to a more continuous learning approach, you're making sure that you're no longer having to put the business on pause and invest a lot of resources in just assessing what are the skills that we have, what are the skills that we need, what do we need to build to make up that gap. So by constantly reassessing our skills based on processes, needs, and just I'm gonna say osmosis. So obviously, like because learning is not a moment, it's ever present. Learning happens all the time in different formats. So it's all about how can a business can enable itself to, I'm going to say, capture those informal moments of knowledge sharing that still covers business critical information, formal knowledge and expertise that the business needs to thrive. So, by making sure that we have mechanism, just like a good environment to nurture from both the employer, the individual, the manager, the organization. So, across all front, that kind of awareness of, hey, what what are we lacking to actually win on the market, win on the strategies, and do we at some time like do we already have that skill, but it's just not shining enough on the rest of the team? So it's all about leveraging what the business and the individual needs, and making the most of what's actually being done anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem a lot of organizations have, right? That idea of capturing and transferring subject matter expertise that exists in these little pockets in our organization, and how do we actually use that to learn and grow at an organizational level? So it's not just living in the minds of just individual people. Um, so maybe I'll just do a quick run through of these three levels, just so we're all on the same page about what we mean. There are examples on this slide of how to do these, but I don't think we'll get into that here. We're going to dive into just a few examples in the coming slides, and then I think we really want this to be an opportunity for you to ask us questions, those of you that are here, so that if you have specific situations or specific challenges that you're dealing with, we can maybe see if we have some ideas that can help support you. So quickly, in a nutshell, that first level individual, we need to empower employees to own their development, because if people aren't learning, our organization can't learn either. So this is the foundation of absolutely everything else. And one thing I do want to call out here is the importance of self-directed learning, which is the whole reason why we phrase this on this slide as employees own their development, because it's really important for learning to be self-directed in the sense of the way that people choose to learn, the things they choose to learn, but also accepting responsibility for their own learning. And I think that's a key way to both motivate learners and to keep them accountable for what they're doing. And then obviously that has to be supported at the team and the organizational level by having the right kind of culture and the right mechanisms in place to support those things. So that's the individual learner in a nutshell. We then obviously have the team level, and this is governed by our managers, because managers have a really critical role to play when it comes to fostering an environment of continuous learning on their teams, and then obviously ultimately in our organizations. I'm sure probably everyone listening today is familiar with the work of Carol Dweck on growth mindsets, the difference between fixed mindsets and growth mindsets. But the one thing I want to highlight is that the number one factor that influences mindsets on teams is the mindset of the leaders on those teams. So it's really important that our leaders have growth mindsets so that their teams and then ultimately our organization can have growth mindsets as well. And then finally, that last level, at the organizational level, we need to be implementing processes that enable and encourage learning in our organization. We need to be encoding it in our business practices at every single level. And the best way to do that is to ensure that learning in our organization is aligned with our business strategy. Creating that alignment helps to make sure that whatever we're doing in terms of learning is actually helping to impact those things that matter in terms of how our business performs at the end of the day. So at a high level, these are the things that we need to create a continuous learning environment in our workplace. But obviously, that's easier said than done. Um, so I
And
think
bringing the alignment is one thing, but promoting it as well. Like oftentimes there are already things in place in your business. So as a leader, you feel like you're doing your part and you're kind of disappointed because, oh, employees aren't taking advantage of it. But are you really sure that they're aware of it, that it's encouraged, that it's promoted, that it's there's actually like perceived value in employees like being proactive on their self-development. So making sure that, yes, it's aligned with the business strategy, but also making sure that employees are aware that everybody across all three levels understand what's in it for them as well. So nobody, like, there's not an employee that's going to go through a training, like a self-directed training, just for the sake of doing the training. It's always in support of a change of behavior, improving your life quality, improving performance. So it's really important to emphasize on the employee why it benefits him or her to be proactive and their self-development, and that it's the manager's job afterwards to either support those who are proactive or take a more coaching position to help employees with just self-discovery and just help them recognize those are your strengths on which you can lean on. Those are your weaknesses that maybe you can try to level up, and just kind of force a reflection so that once again, we're going back to so that the employee can actually own his professional development. Because the employee, obviously, we want our employees to stay as long as they can with us, but chances are they're going to go elsewhere. So it's all about how can I impact my employee in the most positive way for the time that it's working for our business, but also that every single time it's learning something, it's benefiting the employee, but us as well during that journey.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that that brings us to this growth opportunity matrix that we've developed at WorkLeap, which really speaks to those first two levels around the individual and the manager. And maybe Mathieu, I'll let you talk a bit about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once again, a pattern we're seeing when we're talking to some of our customers and or just managers in general say is how do I play my role? Like, okay, yes, we want our team to better perform, to be more engaged, but I don't know how to tackle this. So, like, a real easy way to just kind of get an open conversation is to do this quick assessment. At the end of the day, you have an employee who, on a certain spectrum, knows how that person wants to grow in the business, but also how it wants to grow in life. So, like, just how self-aware that person is about where he wants to go. And sometimes there's a disconnect. Like, I want to become president of the United States. Well, I'm not going to do that in the job, but to get there, there might be some skills that I can work on that are going to be benefiting my life goal and the business for the short term as well. So it's all about alignment. And it's bringing back the importance of, as a manager, knowing your employees beyond just the name of the person. You have to build rapport. You have to care about what are people's deep motivation, aspiration, so that you can lean into that and build the narrative once again to help them know what's in it for them. Hey, I know that in your life you want to become head of marketing, but as of today, you're a very green junior, fresh out of school. So there's a gap. But to help you get there in 10, 15, 20 years from now, those are the milestones you'll need. And right now, we should try to get you to the first milestone because it's also aligned with our business needs. And therefore, you have an engaged employee who understands the importance of the training, that it's not only benefiting the business, and slowly becomes more accountable and takes ownership of its own development. So I strongly encourage you to use this matrix with managers and just try to get them to do an assessment. Could you position all of your team members on that grid and adapt your management style, leadership style accordingly so that they're more proactive with their learning? And if you get to that point, that means we're optimizing the time of the manager, because the manager becomes in the position of service, the position of support, and doesn't have to do the self-discovery that the employee should be doing on himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this again speaks to that point of the importance of learning being self-directed, right? And so for learning to be both self-directed and to be aligned to our organizational and business needs, that's where this comes into play, is finding where that alignment exists between what the individual employee wants to do, what their goals are, and then what we need from them as at a business level.
Exactly. And by doing so, you're going to be able to, because let's say we're taking the Trailblazers as an example. So you have those highly engaged employees in the business that, hey, they're not looking to go, they're just looking to grow, but they're not aware of what's the next position that might be available from you. What are my options? So as a manager, if you know that you have someone who wants to stay in the business, then you can be proactive on, hey, let me pull the curtain, tell you a bit about the business strategy, the 3-year business strategy. Like, those are not needs that we have right now, but hey, we're going to need someone like that in the future. Would you like to become that person so we can start investing on you so that when the seats open, you're ready for it? On the flip side, you have the opposite, meaning you have those highly focused people who know where they want to go in life. And at some point, those people can become a bottleneck because they're going to be expert. They're going to cap in your business. And they're the people, the experts that, hey, blind spot, that person just told me he or she was going to leave. Well, had I been proactive about it, I could have planned ahead. Like, you want to go there? This is as far as I can get you. So before you actually get to that breaking point, how can we leverage you as a subject matter expert so you can actually build a succession plan and make sure that your expertise before you leave is passed on to as many people as we can. So it de-risks people, it helps you consolidate what you know, and it also sets you in a position that when that person leaves, you're happy to recommend that person to help him or her on the other stage of its life.
Exactly. And I think that that also speaks to the what we were saying at the beginning, that learning is the understory of every other moment that matters. And you've just mentioned succession planning as one of those. I think that's it. We're thinking about learning as something that is important around onboarding, also around offboarding, right? So how are we
Mm-hmm.
taking that knowledge and capturing it and transferring it, and ideally doing that proactively before we get to the point of, oh no, we have 2 weeks to capture the year's worth of knowledge that exists in this person's mind before they move on. So I think absolutely, if you have that kind of a culture in place already, it makes all of these moments that matter a lot easier and more impactful, at a business and at an individual level.
Absolutely.
So we talked a bit, so that growth opportunity matrix speaks a bit to the individual level and how we align that with the needs of the team or the organization. Something that I think often we struggle with in L&D is how we align learning to business performance and how we measure learning impact when it comes to what impact does our learning actually have on the business at the end of the day. And I think one of the most effective ways to do that is to make sure that learning is directly related to performance outcomes. And when I say performance, I mean both business and people performance, because ultimately learning should be helping to achieve both, right? It should be helping
Mm-hmm.
me as an individual performer to perform to my best. It should also ultimately be leading to, me having new skills or different behaviors or changing the way I work that has an outcome on business performance. And when learning is integrated into organizational culture at the business strategy level, and learning interventions and programs are clearly linked to business objectives and to goals, it becomes a lot easier to determine a quantitative metric that you can use to measure effectiveness of learning programs. And when you have that kind of a metric, you can then use that and create a continuous improvement process to assess how you're achieving your goals, how you're sharing your results. It helps to create a better story for those of us in L&D when we're talking about our impact, which, I know personally is often a struggle in terms of how we explain the impact of what we're doing. But when learning is more closely aligned to business performance and business goals, it becomes a lot easier to determine what is the impact, or what impact are we trying to have. When I was working with clients to align their learning strategy to business performance, the questions on this slide are the ones that we would go through to make sure that there was alignment. We would be thinking about, before we start doing anything, what is the business outcome of any learning that we're trying to implement? Like, what is it that we're actually targeting at a business level that we expect this to impact? What do we need people to do differently to achieve that outcome? Because that helps us to determine what are the learning activities that we need to get people to do something differently, to change their performance. And then finally, we can use the answers to those questions to determine, how will we know that the learning was successful? What will we measure? And that question, I think, if we start with that final question, it's very hard to answer. But if you start with the first question and you move through these stages, it becomes much easier to answer the question around what are we measuring and how will we know we were impactful.
Yeah, and if you start with the last question, you can also end up with a contaminated data situation, because the default way people will measure success is that review at the end.
Mhm.
Evaluating, did I enjoy my time, does not tell anything in regards to, did I actually change my behaviors. So I would actually encourage, it's not either or, it's like do both. Like you want, after a specific training, to validate, hey, did you enjoy yourself? But I would strongly recommend that you do surprise follow-ups with either follow-up activities or surveys on, hey, just as a reminder, let's take a moment to reflect on the training we did 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago. What did you actually change ever since? And that's where you're putting employees in a position where, oh, yeah, that's right, I actually changed the way I work. I actually got something out of that, which will set the stage for a better adoption at the next training you're putting together, but also giving you more data points in terms of return on investment.
And I'll maybe give just a quick real example that we're working on right now in the work that we're doing internally at WorkLeap. And one of those things is that we're launching a new leadership development program. And we are, like you just said, we're looking at, at one level, are leaders participating and using the new program? Are they enjoying the program? Are they satisfied with what's being offered to them? And then at another level, we're looking at, does participating in the program lead to an improvement in their leadership skills? And then we're taking that one step further and saying, does improving their leadership skills lead to better performance by our leaders in their roles? And then finally, we're taking that even one step further and saying, does the improved performance of our leaders in their roles, does that actually lead to better business outcomes for us at an organizational level? So kind of moving through all of those levels from, the first one of, like, are people satisfied with what we're offering? Are they using what we're offering? But so often we get stuck there in L&D, and we're not able to move to those subsequent levels to get to the thing that really tells the best story at the organizational level, which is what real impact on business outcomes did we have.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And just one other kind of how that we wanted to talk about in terms of how to cultivate this environment of continuous learning at work. Communities of practice, I think, are amazing because they hit at all three levels. They hit at the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level. Um, they are able to perform and contribute to so many different strategic activities within organizations because they can help to develop individual employee knowledge. So at that individual level, by participating in a community of practice, I can be improving my own skills, my own practice, from the title. But they're also a great way to take that individual knowledge that's being generated and turn it into organizational learning that can actually contribute to positive business outcomes. Um, I like COPs because they're they're social by their very nature, and we know how impactful social learning can be, and learning from each other. Um, and I also love that they take subject matter experts and they help to create subject matter networks, because it's a network of peers, right? It's not just me as an individual in my head, but it's a way for me to share that knowledge with other people. And then it's also a way for, L&D can be mining these acti, like, are there frequent topics that are coming up that people need help with, that we can maybe turn into formal learning, or helping to identify, this person has a lot of great knowledge in their head, can we leverage them to help us to, to build some kind of formal learning, or is there a way that we can leverage them for mentorship or coaching, or things like that. So I love COPs just because they hit on so many different levels. um,
And they're easy to put in place. Like lunch and learn are pretty common now. It's a known approach tactic, but they can be overwhelming or daunting because, hey, if I'm reaching out to a subject matter expert to ask that person, hey, can you build a lunch and learn? It's like oftentimes people will go in the mode of, I'm a subject matter expert. I'm not an instructional designer. I'm not a teacher. I know stuff. I'm happy to share it, but I am not a teacher. So they get somewhat defensive, overwhelmed. Whereas a community of practice will leverage those subject matter experts, and basically, like, it could be a Slack channel. It could be 1,000 of ways, so long as you get a collective of people, like-minded people with the same very clear interest or theme to gather around. And from there, you'll possibly identify subject matter expert that you didn't even consider or didn't even realize they were as knowledgeable as they were. Let them speak together, and topics for formal content in a LMS or any like business critical information will emerge in itself as their conversation evolves. From like either an HR leader or L&D will be able to identify, oh, that's like there's a good response rate on this specific topic, and oh, we don't have anything formalized in-house, so maybe we can either take the summary of everything that's been done and use that as raw data to build a course, or maybe take aside the 2-3 better collaborator and can we come up with something to support that, because chances are we're going to hire someone in a month, in 6 months from now, and that's going to be relevant to that people. So when I was talking about capturing those informal moments filled with still like golden nuggets of information, communities of practice will do that by itself. It's self-sustainable HR. Like the whole point of having a continuous learning culture in the business is to remove that from either the manager or the HR workload. You guys are already doing enough. What can we put in place so that employees actually own this part and you're just a facilitator? You are in support. So let them talk about what they care, what's clear, what's getting them excited, what's not clear, and reach out for help. And those will all be signals for you to just leverage and lean on. And, oh, this question has come up 5 times in the last 6 months. Maybe we should do a quick video and put it in a learning path for that next person we're going to hire, and just fill in the gaps in your onboarding program or just like growth plan, individual growth plan. So it's a very simple thing you can put together. You can come, like, put this in place by tomorrow. A few Slack channel, get your best people in there and put them all public, so that once again, it might also be a way to encourage internal mobility. If there's a designer channel on Slack just for designers, maybe my front end dev is going to have an interest in that. And then you'll capture opportunities and just encourage people to share what they know. And from there on, you're in a much better place, much more resilient business.
And I think to that point, there's a resource that we're going to be sharing today to help you to encourage teamwork and team sharing in your organization, which is a guide on creating effective lunch and learn sessions. And like we've been saying, I think that's an easy first step if you're not already doing them, and it's also an easy thing that you can build on top of junction with a community of practice.
Absolutely. So from those communities of practice, if you can identify some topics that are of interest and the right people to talk about it, that guide will basically give the blueprint for that subject matter expert that doesn't feel like an instructional designer to collect their thought and go past the blank page syndrome so that everything that's created by employees have somewhat of a similar look and feel, standardization of knowledge sharing. So we're making it easier for you guys to take action.
And that was everything that we wanted to talk about today. So I think we're going to open it up for some Q&A.
That's absolutely right. Kiara, Matthew, thank you both so much. I just, before we get into the questions, there was two things that both of you said that I was like, I want to reiterate them. One, Matthew, when you said people are not looking to go, they're looking to grow. I mean, just, I really felt that. And then the subject matter experts to subject matter networks. I think that's really critical. And one of the questions that came up during, and we've touched on this throughout the conversation, but do you both have any more thoughts on just ways that you can encourage those subject matter experts to get involved in opening their minds to the organization and sharing their expertise? Like, they've got jobs, they're busy. Like, what are some of the ways that maybe HR or organizations in general can kind of start to set a culture for encouraging that type of activity?
I can go first. I will say that you have to make it easy for them. It has to be easy. And in my experience, I've worked with a lot of customers that have been on this journey of trying to democratize learning. So to say like anybody can be a content creator, anybody can go in and has knowledge in their head that they can share. And the things that make that happen are by making it easy for them to do it. And Mathieu was talking about this, but like they're not instructional designers, right? So these are not people who necessarily know the most effective ways to take the information that's in their head and put it in people's hands. And that's where those of us in L&D can be really helpful in terms of creating templates, in terms of, for example, in an LMS course, like having a template that they can just plug and play that you've already designed in a way that you are confident is instructionally sound, so that someone can just take the points that are in their head and put them in. So to me, that's the number one thing you can do, is just make it easy.
Yeah.
Everybody's got an opinion. It's just, I mean, it's the same situation where, hey, what do we think about that? Crickets. But as soon as someone in our business, it's Francis, as someone breaks silence, then suddenly everybody's got something to say. So if you can lean on, and I go back to that, if you can lean on what's in it for them. So to use your specific case, if we're looking at subject matter experts and we want them to shine their expertise on the rest, what's in it for them? Most likely they're sick and tired of repeating the same things over and over again. So by the end of the day, reach out to all of your managers and subject matter experts and ask them, what are the 3 things you keep repeating over and over again? Right off the bat, by end of today, you have the blueprint for 25 learning assets that you can create. And from there, it saves them time. So that's what's in it for them. It shows to the rest of the employees that, hey, that's a good way to be efficient. And anybody who's not going to agree will want to argue. And then all you have to say is, you know what, we're open to revisit that.
Yeah.
Propose me something better. And that's where it's becoming continuous. So you can gamify this whole thing. It's a friendly competition. Who's right? And we'll only work with the latest asset that we can all, or the majority will agree as, this is the source of truth for now. But lean on like who can actually break the silence, start the conversation, and put everybody else in a, hey, I have an opinion on this. Everybody loves to share opinions, be it they're right or wrong. That's not even the importance. We want them to challenge. That's how innovation stems afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of one of those things too, where it's like the first step's the most important one, right?
Exactly.
You need to just open the channel for the opportunity to share the knowledge, and then it'll snowball. It'll start to go from there.
And if you have an issue getting getting that snowball going, maybe it's the right time to take a step back, and maybe learning isn't your problem. Maybe it's just a symptom. Like if you have a highly engaged workforce, it shouldn't be all that hard to get 1, 2, 3 people as ally.
Yeah. Now I'm no expert on acronyms here, so I'm probably going to need both of you to help me with this question. But are COPs similar to ENGs, EE networking groups?
I would say yes. They're both fundamentally there for networking and for building skill. So I would say they're accomplishing the same objective. They might be structurally different, but I think the concept is the same.
Okay.
or the
Okay.
objective, I guess, the goal.
Right. Okay. Then this is so the next question. This is something that I think comes up all the time for HR, but specifically for L&D, and I'm going to split this question into kind of like a two-part. The primary question is, what metrics or indicators do you use to measure the success of learning and development initiatives? But I want to look at it in two different lenses. The actual initiative itself, how do you measure that that's successful? Like, what are some of the leading and lagging indicators you could use? And then for the impact on the business, what are some of the leading and lagging indicators that an organization could use?
I can
Kiara,
maybe
do you want?
share. Yeah, I was going to say I can maybe share some of the things that we look at. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, at Workleap, we're very fortunate because we use our own product Office Vibe, so we have a really detailed information around employee engagement that we can look at, and there are specific questions that we can correlate to a few different things. Like we, in general, can look at questions in our engagement surveys, in our pulse surveys around growth opportunities. Like people answer questions around growth opportunities. They answer questions around access to relevant training. So that's another really important one. But we also will look at an individual level. So, for example, with our leadership development program that we're launching, we've identified questions in Office Vibe that are indicators of specific skills that we're having our leaders develop. And so we're able to look and to say, okay, if a leader goes and does this training and 3 months later has their team shifted on these questions that are we've identified as being related to the skill that that training is building. So we are very fortunate because we have very detailed information that we can access through Office Vibe to look at those things. I mean, we also obviously look at things that like everybody would look at. Like we look at LMS utilization, we look at course enrollments, logins, those kinds of things as well.
Those vanity
Um,
metric.
Yes, exactly. Like what rating did people give our courses? And that's great information for us, but it doesn't speak to the actual, when we're getting to performance and business impacts. We're also, we also use Office Vibe for performance evaluation as well. So that's another thing that we're able to look at and to say, okay, we are trying to move the needle on performance, and are we actually doing that? So looking at performance data and correlating that to learning activities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always got to be adapted to the audience of who's going to the training as well, because you got to keep in mind that there's a lagging effect to learning. Changes doesn't happen overnight. So you got to be mindful of how long do I need to wait before I actually start to measure the ROI. And from there, depending on the audience, it could be measured in a whole bunch of ways. It could be, okay, did we reduce the number of errors based on a specific audience? Did we reduce the number of employee turnover because of lack of growth opportunity? So it's really depending on what lens you're looking at to measure that success. Obviously, if you're a big business, like high volume of small key roles that move the needle, then it'll be most likely about change of behavior and information retention. Whereas if you're looking at more leadership and soft skill training, then there's a bigger lagging effect because before you actually measure the change, the person who went through the training has to change the behavior, apply it, which would after that create a change on the end user, which will be the measure of success. So it's a very complex question, but I don't think it's just looking at vanity metric, completion rate, and stuff like that. But I don't also think it's just about appreciation and okay, overall, did it feel good or was it in line with the strategy? It's a mix of both.
Yeah, it's
And
it's a complex one. Go ahead, Kiara.
I was just going to say, and also I think it's about identifying, like setting expectations with your stakeholders as L&D. Like I think it's very important for L&D to be taking that kind of a strategic consulting role with the business and with stakeholders. So like Mathieu said, a lot of times we won't have the data on ROI right away. And I think it's very important at the outset of a project or the outset of implementing a learning initiative or a program to set that expectation and to say, we're going to implement this now, but we don't actually anticipate seeing impact for a year. Um, because we don't want it to be that like a month after something has launched, that your stakeholders are knocking on your door saying, what was the impact? And if you can't tell me the impact, then we're canceling. So to set that expectation of this is what we're going to measure and this is when we're going to measure it.
Hmm.
And to be
Yeah.
like I want to make it clear, like change can happen fast. It's just like we can't plaster that all across. Like changes within a month, like you're just going to change the way you're building the learning activities and the course and stuff like that. If we're building something that's very operational, you can have change within a week.
Mm.
But if you're looking to change a process, like train on a process versus train how to be as a human being, it's two different conversations. So managing expectation is definitely part of the conversation, but I want to make it clear you can have very short, fast result just depending on how you address the learning activities.
So I think we can be clear here, though. We could do a full hour just talking about this topic in particular, and probably we should. And so, as I said, we've got that LinkedIn group. So go in there and like let's continue this
Absolutely.
conversation, and we'll schedule a standalone just on this topic because it's a really important one, and it's a multi-threaded, complex topic to discuss. The next question is a good one. So how would you handle resistance from employees who are reluctant to take part in continuous learning?
To me, that's telling of two things. It's telling like building content is something people tend to underplay the importance of learning marketing.
Mm.
Like you got to sell the learning activities, you got to sell the why. It's just like it's not a build it and they will come. Like going back to if someone's reluctant, that person did not understand what's in it for them.
Mm.
Simple as that. So from there on, are we asking someone to do a training when there's literally nothing in there for that person? We've all sit through trainings not knowing what the hell we were doing there. That is a problem. So can we actually hold that person accountable for being reluctant? I don't know. But on the flip side, how did the training was presented to that employee? So I think it's a communication play or alignment play.
And I think this is where it does make sense to take a page, from our friends in marketing. When I used to do client consulting on L&D, we had a whole service offering around marketing learning programs, both internally and externally, because it's such a big challenge. And so many people do have that mindset of if we build something great and amazing and super engaging, people are going to start taking it and they're going to love it. But sometimes that first step of getting people to enroll in a course or enter a course is very difficult because we haven't done enough around marketing the value of that learning program. And you can think about this, like there's so many different marketing techniques that we can leverage that they speak to, yes, obviously, like it's, if we're thinking about how we market content or products or things like that, but we can do the exact same thing internally with our own learning programs. And we can be thinking about like, you know, where are people on the adoption curve, and who are our early adopters and who are going to be our laggards, and how are we planning to communicate with each of them differently through each stage of the adoption curve. There's a lot that we can be doing, I think, around how we market our programs, and thinking about it from a campaign perspective, like thinking of learning as a campaign
Mm.
versus an event or just a course.
Yeah.
And go back to the matrix we built. Like you'll see, is that person reluctant to a specific training, or is there a pattern? Because if there's a
Mm.
pattern, maybe it's just because that person doesn't know how it wants to grow or how it can grow, and you'll adapt depending on where that person sits in the matrix.
So the last question that I have here, we've got 2 minutes left, and I feel like it's a kind of a nice jump off for this. So while the question is kind of a yes or no question, I think it bleeds in, Matthew, to like what you're talking about and how to approach your learning and development programs as a marketing initiative, in a sense of like what's in it for this person. So the question is, how important is it to tailor learning and development programs to individual employee needs and career goals?
So you want to go first? Otherwise, I have a
Very,
brief.
very much so. It's very important to find that alignment between what we need them to do as a business and what we want to do as individuals. And I think that's true not just in learning. Like that's true in everything in our business. Like the values alignment, the purpose alignment, all of those things are really key. But that also speaks to how we communicate about our learning. So like, how does the learning we're offering align to what you want to do and where you want to go, and the impact that you want to make on the business, on your personal career, your personal life, those kinds of things. And I think this is, again, where having some level of personalization can be really helpful in the learning. Like, I'll go back to the example because we're working on it right now, so it's top of mind around the leadership development program that we're working on right now at WorkLeap. And one of the things that we're doing is we have identified 18 skills that we want our leaders to have, and we're creating learning around all 18 of these skills. But we are not asking all leaders to go take all 18 skills. We are asking leaders to do an assessment to identify their own development areas. But even then, we're not being prescriptive. We're not saying, okay, these were your 8 development areas. These are the 8 courses you have to take. We are allowing them to choose for themselves which 8 out of 18 courses they want to take. And that's because we really fundamentally believe that it's important for them to have that choice and to have that level of self-direction in the learning that they're doing when it comes to getting their buy-in. Because if we prescribe you have to take these courses and you do them, but you don't care, you're not invested, you don't believe in it, we're not going to have any impact at the end of the day. And I would much rather that you don't take one of the courses that maybe was in your development area, but you take another one and it actually makes an impact on how you do your job day to day. That's what matters most.
I'll be the
Mathieu, final
devil's
word to you.
advocate. I'll be the devil's advocate in a minute because I don't like. You can prioritize and value that if you're in a position to, if you can afford it. To me, there are business criticals that you should prioritize, and offering custom experiences, learning experiences comes afterwards. Like there's some foundational information that should be captured within your business that should be known across all products, all business, like products, sales enablement, stuff like that. And then going back to the communities of practice, those will be able to craft those side quests and like organic levels of interest that people can leverage when they feel like it, if they feel like it.
Crawl, walk, run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start small and build.
Well, Kiara, Mathieu, thank you both so much for this session. I certainly loved tuning in. I'm sure the audience did as well. So thank you both so much for joining us in the Moments That Matter Summit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.